All right, so welcome back into the show today. We're going to be going live, give you guys some insights on where the market is going. Rate cuts could be on the verge of happening. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back in. I do want to thank our sponsor, and that is our channel partner, and that is Swede Network. You guys, of course, can learn a lot more about it. But one of the big things they've done here recently is this right here, is Swede Pay. And I'll play this for you. I'm going to mute it, but I'll play you kind of the cycle of this. This is getting into a lot more integration into payment. What I think is going to be going on with Swede is we're going to see an interesting rotation, maybe out of Ethereum and possibly in some other projects like Swede. But where this is going is a good thing. Remember, huge advancements on Solana Pay. When that we could be the next one for a very big play on infrastructure. And whether or not they get some big partners, I think that'll be the key thing to watch around Swede. So let's go over to the news real quick. I want to lead off with this right here. All eyes are on Chair Powell now. A lot of people are looking at the inflation numbers coming in. Obviously, headline inflation was cold. Core inflation coming in a little hotter. Month over month inflation pretty much on cue. And then many people saying, okay, now I think Trump gets his wishes on the quarter basis points. And I don't know, do you think that we should have cut in July? Do you think that Powell is too late again? Have we done too much damage to the job market?
What it tells me is
all of that is really a question mark. And I think we're going to get into it. I've got a clip. I think they were going to cue it up for you. But I've got a clip real quick that will kind of get into the uncertainty. Have we surpassed that stage? Take a look.
push that things are going to get worse. What it tells me is that if you take it very simple, you summarize very accurately. There's been a push that things are going to get worse. You're going to look at a month that's going to be really scary. But most likely, if you look at the entire regime of the effects of tariffs and the uncertainty, we are definitely over the hump. And considering that this number isn't worse than expected, I would say moving forward that your interpretation is exactly correct. We're way over our skis, and what we're really finding is the last mile inflation is sticky. It was sticky, and really in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't break out as that the last 3 or 4 months are extraordinary in any fashion.
All right, so many analysts still looking at this has been a lot softer. I had an interview earlier this week with Canary Capital, and we kind of talked about this point, and he also came on and talked about that very issue, is that he felt like inflation would edge up but would stay there for some time. He was more concerned around what was happening in the job market. Peter Schiff, though, continues to push on this, and his situation is more around the CPI data that consumer prices increased again. That's a big deal. Year over year is 3.1, and that's excluding food and energy, which are two of the biggest categories. Now, I do agree with that, of what Peter is saying. However, I don't believe, I think he's just trolling here, that instead we should be raising interest rates. The problem is jobs. And jobs is a factor that is starting to come out. Of course, we know what happened with the BLS and everything else this over the last couple of weeks. But I think this is the factor that the Fed is going to have to address. And it's going to be one that I think starts to push into situations right now when you think about where the Fed is and what's it going to look like if we truly see a complete adjustment on jobs, at least in the number level that we've been looking at with these adjustments outward since the BLS started kind of coming back in on some of these data points. But remember, the jobs need, I think it's 150,000 new jobs per month to stay on growth. And as you can see, we've started to be considerably lower than that. And that, I think, is a big factor here. Kobe Isi is talking about President Trump, says he's considering allowing all major lawsuits against the Fed Chair Powell because of the bad, incompetent job he's done. So he's continuing to put some pressure on. And if you guys are playing the ETH investment right now, because we are charging toward an all-time high. We'll go to charts here in a little bit. I'll show you some sentiment data and get into that. But I think one of the things you have to be cognizant of is the fact that this could go sideways near the Fed meeting, which is the 16th and 17th of next month. So we've got about 3 weeks. Remember, we could see a lot of heat up from Trump to still put pressure on Powell to get that quarter. So be on the lookout for that. This may be one of those things where we do get a little bit of a sideways action or possibly a retracement on the fastest moving asset out there right now, which of course is ETH. Now, one of the reasons that much of what I think is pending on what the Fed is going to do is all related to jobs, as I mentioned earlier. This was terrible. Trump's pick for BLS commissioner now suggests suspending the monthly jobs report. Now, first of all, that's a bad move. I think you just continue to put out bad data, and revise it down, because this just shows absolute lack of faith. Now, if you've got maybe an alternate, report, or you've got some sort of new data system that you could start to develop from, okay, but you can't just suspend the monthly jobs report, because the market does depend on this. And I think the Fed is, of course, having to take a look at real strong information around jobs. This is the point I've been getting at for many months, is that jobs are on their way into a bad position. The only thing I'm concerned about right now is that we could see a lot more manipulation. And that, unfortunately, would be very bad, I think, for the market, because it's going to show a lot less confidence of where it's going. If you look at the Fed decision, right now we're hovering around 80%. Let me kind of zoom in on that for the poly market, 81%. Highest yet for a quarter basis points right now. And I think the point that everybody's looking at is maybe there might be a little bet here on the 50 basis points. Not saying go out and bet, but I'm just saying that's a 5%. Is that free money? I don't know. 50 basis points could happen if we do get continued data that does indicate we're seeing slower job growth. And that's the concern I'm really, I think, on board with, is that the jobs are going to be the number one catalyst going forward. How many jobs added in August right now? 50K. That is a dismal number. If in fact we get that, that would be another very bad report if in fact we actually get the report, depending on what the BLS is going to do in terms of how that goes out. Don't forget, guys, make sure and hit the poll. If you're not subscribed to the channel, just take a minute, do that right now. But we're going to look at Ethereum all-time highs, and it looks like the poll is holding it right now on days at 43%. Boy, you guys are very bullish right now. That's 4,800. We're holding it around 45. We just clipped over 45 today as we're going live. And of course, all of this on this CPI data coming through. 40 mil now in ETH shorts liquidated just in the last 60 minutes. All this still very bullish, I think, for what is looking to be ETH season. The real question is going to be, how does this rotate into whether it's altcoins or other narratives? Because remember, it's all about narratives right now. And this is one good example of a narrative that has been very high performing. And that is Circle. Circle, of course, a darling over on Wall Street right now. And their numbers continue to push into just crazy numbers here. I mean, that's 90% in circulation year over year. That's an increase. Then you go into their total revenue and reserve income, up 53% year over year. These are numbers that are astronomical. I think we're going to continue to see Circle push. Now, Circle is still an ETH play. And I think people now are starting to put together what stablecoins mean. Now, I think the next layer of stablecoin development is deployment. And once we see deployment, then it is a matter of distribution. And I think distribution is going to be the key that starts to generate a catalyst into Ethereum. When you look at what's happening on the ETFs, this is just showing you all ETFs, but if we look at Ethereum, that's the Ethereum move right now. This is on the 30-day. Let's go over to the all-time. There you can kind of see big moves right now in comparison to where Bitcoin has been holding, which has somewhat been down and sideways. And I think this is the rotation that we are seeing in the markets. Even the ETFs are also very similar to what price action is doing on spot. Other things I want to get to, which is big, and that is ETH ETFs coming in, and that is $1 billion in inflows for the first time ever. That's roughly 238,000 ETH, guys. That's insane. Think about that for a second and look at where the market is right now in understanding how to invest in ETH, because I think still we are dealing with very little comparison when you look at the overall size of where we're going to see TradFi play into the ETH market. And you got to remember, they've got the #1 sales guy out there. And we're not talking about Gecko, we're talking about Tom Lee. But here's Nate Garassi, he kind of hits on it right here. I feel like spot ETH ETFs were severely underestimated simply because of the TradFi investors didn't understand it. That's to my point. And Bitcoin had a nice, very clean narrative, digital gold, people get it. Remember, Wall Street's a little lazy on this. Maybe though, the issue of ETH and how these treasury companies have been introduced into the ecosystem of TradFi, that they're starting to understand it. And I think maybe that is another reason that we still have not seen a catalyst that could really propel ETH well past its all-time high. And I think that's the real question is, what happens when we hit 4,800? I mean, do we see blue ocean from there? And do you see that kind of retracement in comparison to Bitcoin in its recent run to its all-time high? So think about that. There are some similarities there within it. But this is a good statement right here, is that, and I think this has changed right here. This statement, what it's talking about, is it takes more time for investors to understand. I will say this, the financial advisors that I talk to here in our home state, ETH has always been an interest. Now it is a lead primary asset they are looking at, much like what Bitcoin has been. That is the first time that I've truly seen that kind of shift within financial advisors, and there's a lot of wealth in Florida, and I think that kind of strategy is starting to play out overall. He was saying about more ETFs, because these ETFs have a way of stimulating the market. Listen to what he had to say.
The three major stock exchanges, so NYSE, NASDAQ, and CBOE, they have all filed with the SEC for generic listing standards for crypto ETFs, which basically means that the exchanges wouldn't need to seek specific approval for each spot crypto ETF as long as it meets certain criteria. So this would streamline the approval process. And that's important because right now there are filings out there from multiple issuers for XRP ETFs, Solana ETFs, Cardano, HBAR. We could go on down the list, but there are a boatload of filings out there. And the expectation is that this standardized crypto framework will be implemented, say, in the next 2 months or so. And so if and when that happens, I think you're going to see the floodgates open. We're going to see a wave of approvals, and you're going to see, again, a boatload of new crypto ETFs coming to market.
What Nate's hitting on there is interesting, because this will affect the broader crypto market, I believe, much like what happened when Ethereum came onto the scene, because it was still, remember, still not in a position to where we've seen the administration and regulation play into it. And we have not had a staking ETF come about yet. So if that happens in conjunction with a lot of these other assets that start to roll out on that, I want you to think about this, guys. What you're dealing with right now is mostly Main Street investors. Well, what do they invest in? They go into ETFs. So they're getting all this information fed to them now from financial advisors. So you got private office, investment capital, private equity, all sorts of companies that are looking to park money. ETFs is one of the ways that they rotate in and out. They do sweeps on it. This is a traditional strategy that's being used by the wealthy. And I think that plays into what Nate's getting at. And that means a lot of activity for some of the biggest market caps out there, probably in the top 20 to top 25 tokens to be looking at. Here's Matthew Siegel hitting on this right here, and he's talking about BitMine. BMNR just filed to expand its at-the-market equity program by 20 billion. That's 5x increase in issuance capacity right now. So what this simply means, guys, imagine a company saying, I'm going to go out and 5x my capital investment. I'm just going to 5x it. These are almost unheard of capital investment strategies. This is why I think it is a gold rush. And a lot of what is happening on Wall Street right now is they're starting to recognize it. Think about it this way. Look at the early stages of AI and what happened with NVIDIA. Compare that to the early stages of some of these other projects out there, whether it's ETH, XRP, you could look at many others within it, maybe even Solana, Hedera, all these kinds of tokens that are playing into a new discovery layer of tech. Now, it doesn't mean all of them are going to win at all. It means you're going to find investment guys that are going to look at, these are the ones that are starting to play, and they're going to start investing into those. So that is a big factor. Could BMNR and some of these treasury companies really start to break loose. Another one you have to look at is the fact that we're starting to see activity coming in from a lot of these big companies on layer ones. And this is interesting. This is ARC, Circle's layer one. This is a blockchain purpose-built, obviously, for stablecoin and finance. And they're looking at FX and capital markets here, which I think is interesting. But look at this. They're talking about using USDC as native gas, so that's ETH. Built-in FX change, that's going to continue. Remember, the size of the FX market is massive, okay? And then a deterministic sub-second finality, opt-in privacy, that's an interesting feature, which we have not seen yet. And then first full circle platform integration, this of course goes into USDC. All this very positive for Ethereum. That being an L1, and you have other companies out there that are going in the same direction. You know, here was Ryan Sean Adams. He's talking about all of this being very bullish for ETH, that Stripe and Circle both are building EVMs. And I agree to a certain extent because the layer 2s still do a good job within this. Now, granted, if we do see the advancement of what could be some big updates on ETH, maybe that changes a little bit. But right now, it is what it is, and I think this is the key. Now, Jeremy Allaire kind of hit on this. Now, he goes into a clip here that we have, and what he's talking about is the relationship with treasuries and stablecoins. So take a look.
For stablecoins to work properly, they need to be backed by something, typically treasuries. There's a big question mark about who is going to be buying our treasuries in the future, and a view among some that the treasury market is ultimately actually going to be supported for some period of time as a function of the advent of stablecoins, because more people are going to need to buy these treasuries to back the stablecoins, and that should give a boost to the treasury market. Other people say, maybe, but it's really just a recycling of money because the money is going to come out of the banks. And by the way, if they're sitting over with the stablecoins, it's actually less efficient from an economic perspective, given that you actually can't effectively then loan against that money in the same way that a bank could.
Right. I think the view that this crowds out the ability for lending to happen, I actually think is a mistaken view. I think that when you have super high velocity, very high utility money, people are going to want to borrow that, and I think we're going to see very robust credit markets develop that are operated on blockchain networks, and we'll see actually more efficient credit delivery with more transparency, more supervisability. We actually think we can get to a safer financial system with more effective credit delivery built on this new kind of stablecoin.
That almost.
All right, so a couple of points to break down there. First of all, I want to validate that what they're talking about in terms of supporting and backstopping the treasuries, because treasuries are backed usually with one-to-one assets. And if you look at what has been pressure on treasuries and a lot of these curves over the last couple of years has been the concern in Japan, with many people are kind of touting that the reverse carry trade could play and unwind a lot of the treasuries, and that the play is really that stablecoins could help backstop that loss. That's the idea. So if he is right and it does occur, and then the next leg is new credit instruments, that could really break up the banking cabal that opens up a whole new layer of new credit opportunities. And I think this is big. We're already starting to see this in some of the market right now, but it's very narrow. If you look at what's happening on Coinbase with Morpho, many of the loan projects out there that are activating on Bitcoin and Ethereum, we know this is now starting to happen in other platforms, and this is just a sliver of the market. So this could get big quickly, and of course, that does play to the benefit of what's happening with USDC, but it also opens it up for other things. Think about RLUSD, being able to loan against that. PYUSD, there's all sorts of opportunities. PayPal would be one to watch because there is an opportunity with PayPal because of the ecosystem they have and the access to capital. The problem is I think their level of profitability would drive the rates too high. I don't know if you guys see this, but PayPal tries to do a lot of business loans. They're doing heavy marketing out there right now on business loans, and the rate in which they're trying to get small businesses to engage is astronomical. So I think this could be a factor if we see stablecoin loans out there. Because imagine, most of these are, they're almost instantaneous. The TVL is easy to do. In many cases, you can also become a liquidity provider in many of the DeFi platforms. We're probably going to do a video on that for you guys, because there's a lot of things happening in DeFi right now. By the way, if you want a DeFi video and getting into looking at whether it's going in and earning yield on some of these DeFi platforms directly to the asset, like something like USDC, or in a paired asset with with USDC or a stablecoin, let us know in the comments. We're thinking about doing a deep dive on that. Now, Jeremy also went in a little bit further because he's talking about these asset classes that are being built right now. Obviously, Bitcoin, kind of already a permanent asset class. The question is what else plays into this? Let's go to this clip.
Something like Bitcoin in the permanent class of just a store of value.
Well, I think there's sort of
there's the two things you're worried about.
Macro view over the kind of fiscal.
But you could never do a stablecoin based on Bitcoin.
That's correct. I mean, essentially, what we see, in fact, as a major growth driver in our business is the internationalization of these digital dollars. And you even hear that from President Trump, Secretary of Treasury. We want to export these digital dollars. We want to put them in the hands of people who want to hold them and transact with them.
Right.
So that global demand is very real. And I think this is a kind of currency competition on the internet versus China versus other markets. And this is a technological weapon to compete. And it turns out also that people don't want to hold a volatile crypto asset in many places. They want to hold a dollar.
Right.
Because it actually is significantly
next
more
week
stable.
it's still worth
It
a
is
dollar.
actually
Yeah.
Okay, so he said a key word there, or a key phrase there, and that is exporting US dollars. And that is something that Trump will really like because it starts to open up and do two things. The first thing it does is it starts to stabilize the US dollar globally, but it really starts to go head to head with the major competing currencies. Because really at this point in a cycle, like all cycles, many great industries and countries and systems fall, and most of the time it's around 200 years. And we've seen this. Are we nearing that with the US dollar? Many people would say that's what digital assets are essentially designed for, is to help supplant what the US dollar may not be able to do. But if stablecoins do create an export of US dollars globally, because remember, there's so many countries that need access to that, and this is instantaneous. We're talking about speed of light, essentially, in terms of value being transferred and being able to utilize on almost every e-commerce platform out there. Again, it goes back to distribution. So all the e-commerce platforms have got to be able to make that available. And I'm talking about just as easy as PayPal was available for someone to pay with anything, just as easy it is for you to pay with a credit card on any kind of place, and in turn, take payment as well. All of those play into a very big opportunity. Now, stablecoins start to represent an interesting phenomenon. One that is happening right now is this right here. And this, of course, is a company called Alt5. Now, Alt5, we'll talk about who they are, but they're essentially offering a partnership here with World Liberty Finance. World Liberty Finance, is Trump's organization. The concept behind this is that we're going to see a stablecoin engine with Alt. Go to their website real quick. I want you to look at the industries that they're in right here. Banks, brokers, asset managers, hedge funds, family offices, fintechs, payment service providers, exchanges, brokers, Visa, MasterCard issuers, and then global merchants. This, guys, is stablecoin as a service. And I think this is something that will be intriguing, especially if we continue to see World Liberty Fi play in these areas. I'm telling you, the digital asset side is just now being explored by what could be some of the biggest companies on the planet in the next 5 years. So think about where NVIDIA is today. Now look at the transition of global finance, and what that might look like in the next 5 years. That is where it starts to get people's attention. Don't forget, though, you've got even L-Bank now partnering up with World Liberty Fi. They're going into a kind of a loyalty program. This is another tool set that I think they're going to try a lot of things, World Liberty Fi, in essence, to create different sorts of programs, strengths, obviously, into what is happening on DeFi, but also on decentralized innovation, which I think we'll see and continue to see more of. The key is what's going to be sticky, what's going to really work. And if one gets sticky, expect the domino effect. And what I mean by that is once that something works, you're going to see Fortune 500s lining up by the hundreds being able to engage and get that going. And whether it's companies like, McDonald's or any other major retailer out there that could go in this direction, I think that would be the next step. And all this still very, very connected to ETH. So I want to play another connection here with World Liberty Finance and Circle. Take a look at this.
There is like this maybe in the history of finance that brings visionaries and people who have the relationships and the experience together to create something so unique. And one other thing that I want to point out is USD1, we just announced the first ever point program for a stablecoin ever. So what that means is users of USD1 are going to be able to earn loyalty points similar to airline miles or credit card points for holding, transacting, and using USD1. This has never been done before, and it's going to create massive, massive effects for the growth.
Which raises the next question. Explain the economics of the way your stablecoin, USD1, works relative, for example, to what Jeremy Allaire is doing, and how there's where the money is that effectively pays for the loyalty programs.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Unlike our competitor, we have no long-term rev share deal with any of our distribution partner. So while we're only 1/30th the market cap of Circle, we are already far more profitable than they are. Now, that's because Circle and Coinbase made a deal a long time ago that Coinbase gets 60% of the revenue that comes from Circle, regardless of what happens in perpetuity. Because Circle is owned by Coinbase, other exchanges don't want to work with them. They're being paid to work with them. But they view working with Circle as doing a deal with the devil because they're directly supporting their competitor.
What do you really think?
Okay, deal with the devil. It's really talking about distribution. But remember, distribution up to this time in the industry so far has been a fraction of what it will be. So imagine, commerce transitioning to stablecoins globally and what that distribution will look like, because it's going to be every major company, every major player out there. Now, whether World Liberty Fi, which they have a lot of partnerships, and they have, another out there doing it. But I think the key is still they're very speculative. They're much like Circle was 5 years ago, very speculative. Many question whether or not, Tether would eat them alive. There was a lot still yet to be played. And of course, all of that headed toward eventually an IPO. And I think maybe that's what we're going to probably see happening here with Wilfy. So WLFI, a lot of speculative premiums right now on the crypto market, mostly because of its political connections. So there's still a lot of pressure politically. And as we get into the midterms next year, you can bet that the Democrats will put a lot of this on the front plate of countering Trump and a lot of the Republicans in terms of position. Don't forget, put some questions in. I'm going to answer questions here live at the end of the show. And then we are going to go to the charts as well, and we'll take a look at some of the sentiment on overall. I want to hit on one point that is kind of an outlier that people may not be watching right now in terms of how could this affect crypto. And one of them is this tweet right here from Elon Musk. And what he's getting at is Apple behaving badly. Imagine that, Apple behaving badly in a manner that makes it impossible for any AI company besides OpenAI to reach number one in the App Store, which is basically an antitrust violation. All right, so what he's getting at is that Apple controls the purse strings and access to one of the biggest market ecosystems out there, the iPhone. And if in fact that is the case, and we start to see integration that could be user selected, or at least a level playing field, this could play into some very interesting themes around other crypto projects. And who's the biggest AI player out there? Well, you got to look at Solana. And could that play into it from an agent standpoint that could be integrated? It's what we've been talking about here on the show quite a bit, is that agents on the iPhone is really the next level of Siri. Siri is over, and they just need to concede defeat, allow you to use Grok or OpenAI or Perplexity or whatever, even Anthropic if you want to. and plug that in and use that as your basically your voice assistant, and then start to layer in, the idea of agents. That is a potential play that could go in for the kill. And of course, I think Elon's got enough pressure here that maybe he could pull some strings with, a certain power at B to try to put a little pressure on Apple. We'll see if it plays out. One other thing I want to show you guys real quick, and then we'll go to charts, take some questions. This is Google Trends right now on Bitcoin, ETH, and XRP. And as you'll notice right here, we've continued to see this rise in Ethereum coming off the floor. XRP has been holding, still trending up, but ETH and XRP now starting to vie for, in comparison to Bitcoin, equal market attention. And this is the attention economy. I talk about it all the time. Narratives are the attention. Attention is profit. And if you're in the right place at the right time on the narrative, if you've made a play on it, then most likely that kind of attention is going to drive a lot of money into your portfolios into that. We'll take a few questions and get to the charts real quick. Just taking a quick look at ETH. Right now on the daily, still holding in at what looks to be right around 44.88. It did hit 4,500. Sentiment is still positive right there, guys. So that's holding up pretty nicely right now. When you look at this overall, if you guys have never seen our MSI, that's basically a tool that we use on all of our charts, and it's one I like. Let's get to a couple of questions. We'll look at some other tokens here in a second. Trump-backed World Liberty Fi is a devil in itself. Well, I think many people are kind of looking at a lot of those kinds of issues out there with Wilfy. It's very speculative, and I think it still has a lot of issues from a standpoint of the political arena. Just there's a lot of headwinds for sure. Bitcoin dominance almost below 59%. That is true. Yeah, it is 59.85 right now, slipping down. And if you look at this, this is the range that if it breaks through right there, guys, this is going to get interesting, because that right there could indicate some big moves on many of these other altcoin markets. I don't know if that's true about Arthur Hayes. I'm not going to state that because there's a comment. Is it? Okay, the team is telling me that they've researched it. So Upexi just hired Arthur Hayes, so that's interesting. Joshua says, Paul, do you think Bitcoin and XRP holders are moving profits into Ethereum and altcoins? I don't know. I think maybe Bitcoin, the XRP holders I know they're rabid. They are all about XRP to the next level, and I would not say that that's where it's coming from. I still think it's rotating assets coming out of the big boy, and that is Bitcoin, because you've got so many people in profit right now on Bitcoin. Rotation, other L1s coming soon. Agree with that. Institutions are buying Solana too. We're going to see more of that. I think this is a narrative that is going to play out as the ETF for Sol comes into the market. The question is does XRP get an ETF first? If they do, many people think that's going to be an absolute explosion, and we'll see. A couple other things here. ADA gunning it. I think G and I will be sell. Okay, so you're gonna sell a little bit soon on ADA. Let's take a look at the Cardano chart. Yeah, big green candle today. So, and nice, over the last little bit since July, about this time last month. What is that? Up from that zone right there. I mean, ADA's up 55%. So good to you ADA holders out there that are doing that. Some people waiting on your Solana Seeker. Did you get yours, Paul? I'm getting impatient. That's going to be awesome. We have not received ours yet. So it's August 4th. Here, what are we? The clock is ticking, Toli. Clock is ticking. We are almost 10 days in and no Seeker. So there have been, claims that Seekers are arriving, but I haven't seen that many. And that kind of surprises me, because you would think we'd see a lot more on Twitter, okay? Because I know people are going to start saying, I got Seeker, and here's the cool apps, and this is what I love. No reviews out there of any level yet. Is it too late to buy ETH now? You're barely more than double your money, better than Bitcoin. I don't know. I think people would look at ETH right now as the sure play, at least to the all-time high. Then I think you have to go into the potential of what happens after that. Right now, Yeah, you guys are still on the days. Wow, 1,500 votes on days to all-time high. But the point being is that if we do get, well, when we hit all-time high for Ethereum, I think the real question is how does it react above the 5,000 mark? Because I think that's a psychological number that the market is going to be very interesting. So whether you believe it's going to be a 7K or, in my opinion, I think we could see a 10K all-time high in the next 6 months, maybe not by year end, but I do believe that you've got so much narrative playing into Ethereum right now. All of this, now, yes, we could see a retracement. Those are typical market cycles. Remember that if you're brand new to crypto. Number one thing you guys should do is get in our diamond circle. So we always leave a link down below on those because that'll help you. Is 10K likely for ETH? Listen, if you listen to Tom Lee, he's at above 20K. Not for the year, but as a high for where this asset could go in the next 12 months. That's significant in terms of where this market go. Remember, this market is looking at crypto completely different than you and I look at it as crypto people. They're looking at it from a TradFi stance that has never had this in the lens before. Never been in there before. Outside of the Bitcoin ETF, we have not seen these asset and investment advisors start to go in that direction. Man, you guys have a lot of questions today. ETH almost back to 25% of Bitcoin, still a 2x to reach the previous cycle. Most likely, I think you're right. Biggest mystery is when Congress will pass rebates to Americans from tariffs. I don't know if we'll see that. I think Trump, if he does that, that would be huge for the market because that money's going right into crypto. Thank goodness for Trump telling us to buy ETH back when it was 1,400. Did Trump tell you to buy at 1,400? Do we have record of him saying buy at 1,400? I don't know if we do or not. He's always getting those good ones. ETH is a monster, high inertia right now. I think it's too late. Powell, I agree with you. I think that is a concern right now. If there is any concern of us going into a recession scenario, it's the job slide. That's the concern I have. And also, we're dealing with a potential of even a lagging inflationary scenario that could play into this as well. So don't think that we're out of the woods yet on any of this. End of year prediction. I don't like making predictions. What I will tell you this, I think, yeah, it's an all-time high is definitely there, but that 7,200 range, we've showed this before on ETH, and if I go to the chart, and you look at Ethereum and what it has been able to do, right now we are out of a lot of these liquidity ranges. Sentiment continues to fly. I think that 7,200 number is the big one, and if you go with some of these a lot of the chart tools that start to indicate this, Evan and I talk about this quite a bit, that golden pocket is right around 7,200. That might be the all-time high for end of year. All right, let's see here. What are your thoughts on BTS? Seems like the best NAV. Yes, that is a good NAV. BTCS is very interesting. I've talked to Charles many times about what they're doing. They have committed more money to go into Ethereum. I think they're interesting things as well. But any of these treasuries, I think if you're willing to hold a little bit longer, these will probably play out for you. Not financial advice. I'm not telling you guys to go out and put these money in the treasuries. Okay, black hole or circle, who do you pick? Oh, in terms of like DeFi? I'm assuming that's a question for DeFi. Like invest Circle for DeFi yields, and meaning USDC, or go in and pair it with Black, the token. I will say this, Black Hole has started to slide a little bit and shift a little bit of power back over into the other AVAX ecosystem. I won't mention who that is. You got to watch a video for that. We're going to talk about that a little later in the week. So be on the look for that. Like I said, if you haven't subscribed, do that because that will be a big video. What are the chances of them not cutting rates? This is a concern because if we don't get a rate cut, expect, guys, some market instability. We will see it both in the S&P. We will see it in the crypto markets. You could see, Kobe Easy coming in and saying, 60 billion liquidated in the last 60 minutes kind of things. But that's for sure. All right, guys, we are going to do more lives, trying to keep on this for you guys. We'll try to get in here at least a couple times a week. If you like the lives, or if you like more of our deep dives, let us know. We always love your feedback because that's one of the things that really drives the channel, and it's a big deal. So we appreciate it. If you're not in the Diamond Circle, get in now. It's free, super easy to join. It's a free link down below, and follow me out there on X at Paul Barron. I'll catch you next time right here on the Paul Barron Show.